Recording live from the ARC studios, welcome to the Sustainability Podcast. Our goal is to provide engaging discussions on a broad range of topics regarding cybersecurity, sustainability, supply chain management, plus much more. For more information and to get into contact with us, visit us at arcweb.com.
Welcome again to another episode of our Sustainability Podcast. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Gavin Simon. How are you doing today, Gavin?
Pretty good. How are you doing today, Jim?
Very well. As well as our esteemed guest today, Roger Hebert, Industrial Inspection Sales Manager for Boston Dynamics. Welcome, Roger. How are you today?
Good. Thanks. Looking forward to it.
Hey, well, thank you very much for joining us. Let's jump right in. Can you tell us, Roger, a little bit about yourself and how you came to this ecosystem?
So my story is pretty typical. I worked for a few industrial companies before arriving here at Boston Dynamics. So I was at Rockwell Automation beforehand, and then before that I was with National Instruments. And like many, finding a job at a company like Boston Dynamics was really just networking. Knew some folks that worked here, make that connection. I actually live in Nashville, Tennessee, not in Boston, and there's only two of us for the company currently that live in Tennessee, and happen to know the person that worked for him, and I was like, really? You can work for Boston Dynamics and live in Nashville, Tennessee? So it all worked out for me a little over 2 years ago for me.
Hey, that's great. For those of us who don't know all that much about Boston Dynamics, can you walk us through their inception and commercialization of their robot technologies?
Yeah, that's a much more interesting story, I would say. It's one that most people don't know about. And the company, people see a few YouTube videos typically and think, oh, it's an interesting robotics company. But the reality is the company's been around over 30 years. They were founded from work being done at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the MIT. And the MIT had a leg lab performing legged robotic research in the 1980s. So at that time, it was a single-legged robot, their first robot. So one leg kind of bouncing and staying balanced. And that later transitioned to two legs. But surprisingly, people don't realize the history of 30 years of robots. We first released our quadruped robot, Big Dog, almost 20 years ago. It left the lab. So some just long history of robotics, of software. The company has had a few different owners, investors and owners over the years. So Google owned us for a while, then SoftBank, and about a year and a half, I guess 2 years ago now, Hyundai Motor Group as the primary ownership of our company. And that's been a great partnership. They're a company with a vision of kind of robotics and mobility, and what they brought to us has been great manufacturing and quality. So that's been the history, but it really wasn't until, I guess about 3 years ago now, where we started commercialization. So we were always working under contract, developing robots, contract, a lot of government project work. But 3 years ago, we committed to building, at that time, we had suppliers we had to sign on board to build parts for us. And we committed to building 100 Spot robots. Way back then, never sold them before. A company had never sold a robot before commercially. And so we had to staff up sales, marketing, manufacturing, quality, test, all those things. And so really as a commercial company, that's been about 3 years in a 30-year-old company. So it's been a fun ride.
Wow. So today, what are your customers using the robots in? How are they being applied? And can you maybe touch upon Spot and Stretch and what customers are using your robots for?
Yeah, Gavin. So I guess one thing I didn't mention, I should mention, today, the company has three main robot platforms. So we'll talk a little bit, I guess, about Spot and Stretch, which are commercial available platforms. We also have Atlas, many people have seen on YouTube, which is our research and development platform today. It's a humanoid robot. Really, we use it to push the boundaries of robotics, of software, of hardware. Maybe one day Atlas becomes available for sale. But today, those are our three main platforms. And so when you ask about what customers are using robots for today, like you said, Spot and Stretch are the two main commercial platforms. And Spot is really used for autonomous repetitive tasks inside industrial facilities. And really, I'll talk a little bit more about that today, but that's the main focus. There's plenty of other applications for Spot. So we have customers using Spot to perform these boring, repetitive tasks. A lot of industrial sites, what they call rounds and readings or inspection tasks of their pumps, motors, industrial equipment. Is it running healthy? Is it trending in the right direction or the wrong direction? So Spot can walk those sites and check and make sure the motors are not running too hot, that we're not leaking too much compressed air, costing us money, those types of things. And then the other application for Spot is this kind of safety. Can I use a robot to do a task that is unsafe for a human or hazardous for a human? So think about things like confined spaces, chemical areas, nuclear areas, high electromagnetic fields, so inspecting substations at power, those types of things you can use Spot for. Anywhere you might need to put an arc flash suit on and perform a task, Spot's been used for that. And then on the Stretch side, so Stretch is our warehouse robot for logistics operations, so really moving boxes in warehouses. And it's used to unload trucks. So your truck backs up to a warehouse, you need to unload trucks with boxes, you need to build pallets of boxes, depalletize and load trucks, et cetera. So that's what Stretch is used for. And then you have this application where you can remotely operate a robot. So having Spot live on site. So what we're seeing a little bit, seems like lately, is you may have a cluster of your industrial facilities. Specifically, I see this in the power industry, where you may have one group that resides at one plant, but they have responsibility for two satellite plants. Those satellite plants are typically smaller. But out of the one group, everybody kind of reports to the main office, and you've got to drive to the satellite plants. Maybe this person goes 3 days a week, and this person goes 4 days a week. And you're always driving an hour or so between plants. So you're paying your employees to drive, to spend time on the road. You have the challenge of your motor vehicle accidents when they're on the road. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's some sustainability approach you can take there as well. But being able to remotely operate a robot at a remote facility, drive it around the site, up and down stairs, using thermal cameras, using the sensors that it has to perform an inspection. Maybe you need to start up that peaker plant. You have to make sure it's safe to start up. Robot walks around. No one has to go to the site to do that. So there have been some really great strides in this kind of remote operations and being able to use robots for a lot of these plants that were built without robots in mind, right? They're built for humans. And so Spot, with its agility, can handle all those human-centric environments really well. So that's kind of it.
So Roger, what are the complications of the industry? What obstacles and challenges do you see in trying to implement this, revolutionary technology?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, really, the cultural adoption is probably the largest. There are technical things like, do I have communications in place? I need wireless communications for specifically for Spot to be advantageous in these remote applications or outdoor areas or substations and factories. So Spot has Wi-Fi built in, but then it can also support LTE or 5G. It can support kind of one-to-one radio communication systems you might use. But things like communications can become a challenge. If my site doesn't have them, now I need to invest in some way to do that. I've got to address cybersecurity challenges. So that's what we kind of see is can slow things down at certain industries and certain companies is communications, getting past cybersecurity approvals, those kinds of things. But really the biggest complication obstacle, I would say, is really company culture. As you can imagine, if we bring Spot to a site, it draws a lot of eyeballs. And I always ask the question, if it had wheels, would it draw as many eyeballs? Would it be as unique looking if it had a wheeled robot? But something about the legs, people go to science fiction movies and they think this robot's going to take over our whole planet and our world. And it's just the same thing as a wheeled robot. But the legs make it appear different. So I think the culture is the biggest thing. What we see a lot of like manufacturing, for instance, we have a lot of employees working around a robot. We know we've been successful as a robotics company when the employees stop caring about the robot. right? So the first 2 weeks, everybody's taking selfies and wants to do that. But I think that's already happened well in things like AGVs, the automatic guided vehicle market. So you see those in a lot of manufacturing, and they're moving around. People are gladly, working around them. And so there's a culture and an adoption piece that still takes a little bit of time with Spot.
Let's touch on some implications. What benefits are industries seeing from adopting your agile mobile robots?
You talked a little bit about this, but specifically, for Stretch, we start there in the warehouse market. The job that Stretch is doing is picking up boxes and placing boxes, and then picking up boxes and placing boxes all day long, right? That's what it does. And you think about those companies trying to hire people for those jobs, especially in a post-COVID world, those jobs are hard to fill. And if you fill them, they are not long-term jobs. You'll be training and doing it again. And so for Stretch, having the ability of a robot to perform this repetitive task, sort of heavy lift repetitive task, is a big deal. It also allows them, when you're hiring somebody, you're not hiring somebody now to move boxes. You're hiring somebody now to manage a fleet of Stretch robots. And that, on a job application or in your job description, is a lot more interesting than come pick up and move boxes for me. Now it's come manage robots for me. And so we do hear from HR departments talking about, hey, we have a Spot robot, and we're now able to fill jobs we couldn't fill before because we can talk about what they can actually be doing with robotics. So that is an interesting side benefit that the industry, I think, as a whole will see, whether it's our robots or others. You're now able to hire younger people interested in working with robots versus hiring younger people to go do some repetitive task. That's certainly.
Would you say that Stretch is replacing forklifts?
Not so much forklifts. There are some automatic guided forklifts out there. Really, Stretch it's got about 50-pound payload, and so it's going to reach in and pick up a box and place a box. Either it's on a conveyor to move it, or in the future, palletizing, depalletizing mixed box sizes on a pallet. But it's really not necessarily a forklift replacement. It could build pallets, then a forklift would then move.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And you asked about benefits. I talked about Stretch, and then Spot is sort of similar. An old adage in the robotics industry is that robots are used for dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. I think that's true today. Spot can perform a lot of those repetitive tasks. And so if you have people on your staff that you've got 3 hours a day or so of people walking around the facility saying, is this the same as yesterday? Is this healthy? Is this still healthy? Taking that time away and allowing those people to do things that people are better at, actually repairing machines, making decisions based on the data that maybe Spot's part of acquiring, is really more interesting for the person and allows you to be more productive with people's times. So those are some of the things that we see. And then the last one we touched on before was really safety. And so haven't talked much yet so far, but you think about bomb squads or fire departments. You need to go inspect something before they go in. So having a robot go pick up a suspicious package and be able to study it from a safe distance, or go into a building that may have just been compromised by fire, make sure it's safe, those kinds of things. That safety aspect of using robots to do that, very valuable task as well.
So Roger, so far we've introduced Boston Dynamics and talked to, and at a high level talked about your two robot offerings. So just to review, Spot is a anthropomorphic dog with a range of sensors, and Stretch is while not looking humanoid, it is meant to address that market of lifting boxes by a human and moving smaller parcels, packages, and unlike a forklift with perhaps 1,000 pounds or much greater weight.
Right.
Can you, in a very granular fashion, walk through each of those robots, their applications, and talk about the recommendations and considerations that a customer might use in evaluating, is each one of these a good fit for me and my application?
Granular way, you say, Jim. Let me
Yes.
think about that. So, yeah, you did a good job. I mean, did you say something, Gavin? Sorry. Okay. Yeah, Spot, and we haven't really talked about today, those of you that are listening in, Spot is a quadruped robot, a dog-like robot. It's about the size of like a German Shepherd. Some people that see it are like, oh, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be after seeing videos. And like you said, it can carry what we call payloads, so sensors typically. Those sensors for the common sensors that we see mostly deployed are going to be a visual camera with a zoom lens. So I can pan, tilt, and zoom this camera anywhere, in any direction. Thermal camera. I have lights and speakers and so forth, and microphones as well. But then things like acoustic imaging, being able to localize specific sound frequencies. So looking for leaks, we're looking for arcing, partial discharge type events in electrical equipment. And those are kind of fundamental. Then we have this LiDAR scanning application. So in the construction industry, for instance, you can put a LiDAR unit on Spot. You can build a 3D map of the entire facility, your entire building, sub-centimeter accuracy of everything in it. And so being able to compare drawings that you're building for to plans and what's happening in the construction of a building, also important. But there's other sensors like chemical and radiological sensors, biological sensors. So there's a lot of things you can do with Spot. But maybe, Jim, to your question, what is Spot doing? How does someone use this robot? Really get the right sensors for your application. And then you would typically at a larger facility where Spot can be valuable, because if you only have 2 machines and you have employees, they can look at those 2 machines and make sure they're good. And then Spot can autonomously, it has to be a teach and repeat function. What that means is you've got to walk along with Spot once and record a path for Spot to follow in your facility. You say, Spot, stop here at asset A, check the motor temperature, look for leaks in this piping. Now, Spot, let's drive you over to spot B or asset B. Perform an inspection here of this type with these sensors. Go to C, D, and you walk Spot around your facility, up and down stairs, on gravel, wherever you need to go. It remembers that path, and then it can play that same inspection task back for you autonomously on a schedule or on demand. Every morning at 6 a.m. Spot, stand up off of your self-charging dock, go perform this inspection task around my facility. And maybe I've recorded multiple missions for Spot. So at 6 a.m. do this mission, and at 9 a.m. do this mission. And all those are possible and fundamental to the operation of Spot. So think about like your question, like who can use this? How do they use it? If you're performing inspections today that are taking time, kind of repetitive, over and over, same type of thing, let a robot do this repetitive and dull task for you while you focus on something more important, and it can alert you to things. Say this temperature was too high, this gauge was too low. It can alert you, and then you log in. It can create a work order for you. So your maintenance team then can log in, they see their work order, go check asset 12, go out there and take a look, right? So all this is possible. So that's the idea of how someone would approach it. Is, am I spending time doing repetitive tasks? Do I have people that I'm asking to go do the same thing over and over again? So let the robot do it, free up that time for someone else. Does that help?
Roger, can you, what would be a sweet spot in terms of facility size or number of inspections per day? Yeah. Can you outline some of those parameters?
Yeah, good point. So on the industrial inspection side, using Spot for that task we just mentioned, I would say we've done some studies, and from an ROI perspective, your value of Spot, really, we see it depends on the asset, depends on what you're inspecting, right? How critical is this piece of equipment to your operation? So it varies a little bit, but likely 75 inspections or greater. So in the manufacturing world, we have like several smaller assets, and when I compare that to utilities, where utilities have typically larger assets, and manufacturing may have more but smaller assets. It can vary, but we see upwards of, if you have 200 inspection types. So maybe I've got a conveyor with multiple motors and rollers. I've got pumps and motors. I've got equipment and piping to inspect. If you have 200 or more of those, it becomes a really easy ROI calculation. And on the utility side, It can be as low as 50 or so inspections on equipment that may be dangerous or more critical to your operations. So something like that, give you an idea of a starting point.
Before we move on to applications for your stretch robot, one last question on Spot in application area. In terms of utility applications, what has Spot experienced, and what can it do for utilities?
Yeah, speaking of like power utilities and those kinds of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So same type of thing we've seen. You think about in the power space, you got generation, transmission, distribution, and in generation, we've seen robots in the generation side, both from nuclear. Nuclear power has probably, in my opinion, been the fastest generation, as far as generation area goes, adopter, because you have that big safety piece, along with being able to perform some autonomous inspections. So things like radiation mapping of a facility. So today that's a handheld meter that someone carries, and they collect some dose on the human as well. They're doing this mapping to make sure the radiation levels are the same. So Spot can do that. Put that same sensor on Spot, from that same mission, stop in the same places, build a map of that radiation level, make sure it's not changing, prepare for work that might be happening in the area. So that's one we see adopted. But then also in thermal generation, so combined cycle plants, simple cycle plants. I mentioned kind of remote operations. So we're seeing some of that where you have a peaker plant that might start up and shut down during the day. You don't have to have that plant fully staffed. Most of those have a very lightly manned operations. So if I can have a centralized command center somewhere else, use Spot on site to make sure it's safe to start up and start that plant up remotely. Another application in utilities. And on the substation side, we're seeing a lot of different interests there. Everything from perimeter security to, of course, the transformer and asset inspections, as you'd imagine. One of our longest utility customers, National Grid, has been using Spot for probably over 2 years now. And one of their larger substations where they have, it's an HVDC substation, so high voltage DC. So you convert from AC to DC. There's a huge building where that conversion takes place. Humans cannot enter that building at power, but robots can, right? So you can go perform inspections, you can respond to alarms and buildings like that. So a little bit all over. So hydro plants as well.
Well, Roger, I would expect that there's much greater repeatability with a robot. And I'm thinking back to that radiation example that you mentioned, that robot is going to make that measurement at likely exactly the same physical location, whereas the human may not. And that may allow you to spot anomalies in advance of an issue developing.
Yeah, well said. I think we see it, that exact thing. I'm glad you brought it up, Jim. Less in nuclear, the nuclear being so procedural that you kind of expect people to do it exactly the same way. But in manufacturing and utilities, you've got 3 shifts, 3 different people with 3 different priorities, doing a task with equipment. You're checking the health of this motor. Hasn't changed in a year. Are you really going to do it the same way every time? Right, we hear some of our management staff we talk to saying, hey, I'm getting the same number on this sheet, for the last week. I'm not sure if this is as consistently being done as I expect it to be. And so that's exactly right. I mean, a robot doesn't care. It doesn't have a home life. It just shows up, does its task the same way every time.
So let's move on to your stretch robots. Now, I know many of these issues carry over and are quite similar, but what other recommendations and considerations does a stretch robot prospective user face?
Yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit, and we certainly have a whole stretch department that could probably speak to this group better. But stretch, like I said before, 50-pound payload on its arm. It's a mobile base. It's not legged. It's a wheeled base. And it can move. It's made to move boxes. So if your warehouse has trucks backing up to it, and everything on those trucks is palletized, it may not be a good fit for stretch. You need a forklift to take those pallets off, right? If you have heavy equipment coming in on pallets, motors and engine parts and stuff like that, maybe not for stretch. But if you have boxes on your truck, boxes in your warehouse, that's where Stretch fits. So trucks back up to a warehouse door, open the door. If that truck has boxes in it that are less than 50 pounds, Stretch can unload it, and that's the target market for it right now. Does that help?
Yeah, and I think certainly in the U.S. there's been a great increase in work-related injuries, people going on disability disability claims from work. I'm guessing this is meant to make a big impact in that scenario.
Absolutely, right. You get in both robots really, Spot and Stretch. But again, Stretch is targeting that specific job of I've got to unload box. It's a person twisting, bending, picking up, setting down, twisting, bending, picking up, setting down, and that is a job that does have injuries. Not necessarily because of the hazardous environment, like we talked about before, chemical or radiological, but because of the work task that you're taking on. And so most definitely having a robot perform that task is going to cut down. That's also, again, giving you that where I don't have to have 10 people unloading 10 trucks. I can have one person managing a fleet of 10 robots, right? So there's just the advantages there, getting people out of that dangerous environment and optimizing your workforce for sure.
So how does somebody get started? Is it a singular individual, or are these robots only available to companies and utilities? When is somebody calling you? Is there do they keep running into a certain problems? They're like, okay, let's call Boston Dynamics. And lastly, walk us through unboxing your new robot. Is this unboxing an iPhone? Is there a manual? Is there a Boston Dynamics person sitting with you, directing you how to train your robot? I would just love to hear about the onboarding of opening up a new robot.
Yeah, it's awesome. Everybody should have a robot. Get to unbox it. But yeah, maybe your first part was like the customer when they call us. I think it really, in our experience, it varies, of course, as you can imagine. I think with anything, sooner than later, like any customer would say, hey, earlier is better, which is probably true here too, because with a walking robot on your site, you want to understand the site. We want to be able to say this is a good fit or not a good fit for Spot. And then there are some things that you might need to like robotify your site. Specifically, I'm talking about Spot here. So in the case we mentioned like substations earlier, so we've been to some substations where you have conduit on the ground, and it may be just a few inches off the ground, which is fine. Spot can walk right over that. But if you don't want Spot to step on it, it doesn't know if it's going to step over or on it. You might want to build a ramp, right, for Spot to go up and over. We were at a combined cycle plant recently where they wanted Spot to do inspections underneath the heat recovery steam generator. But to get up there, there's kind of a concrete step from the gravel floor, and the concrete step was, maybe I don't remember, about 18 inches or so. The humans could kind of make that big step up. They need to build a little step so Spot could step up and walk upstairs, basically on there. So sometimes you have to robotify the site. And so I'd say by talking earlier, we can point out, this is going to be a better path for Spot to go this way or that way. We're here things to be thinking about as you're getting started. So even things like we talked earlier, communications. Hey, if you're building the site, make sure you put Wi-Fi communications or some type of communications in. So I think obviously we want to talk to anybody as soon as we can to make sure they have the best success using Spot. And then, I guess you asked like when they might call us, and really up to the customer, but it all does depend. Those are the types of things we want to address early. But unboxing, yes, unboxing. So anybody can buy Spot in all the countries that we do sell to around the world. So Europe, Japan, Australia, Singapore, Korea, and others can purchase Spot. And we have relatively quick shipping. We've been able to manage the COVID supply chain pretty well. And you can receive a case with Spot in it and separate cases for the payloads or the sensors that you may have purchased from us. And so there is online. We don't ship a paper manual with Spot. We send a QR code. Maybe it's a little more modern. And on our website, we have manuals for how to install those payloads. Most of them are pretty quick, and as well as short videos on our website. So we have a 2-minute video for getting started with Spot, how to be safe around Spot, how does the battery charging work, how to operate Spot? How do I build this autonomous mission that we talked about earlier? There are little videos for all of those things. So that's something you get started doing yourself. And then, of course, we also have training classes. We can do training at our headquarters in Boston or training on site at our customers' facilities that can be purchased anytime or at the time of purchasing the robot. And then we have partner companies as well around the world that can come help you get started as well. So it's I would say pretty normal in that sense. But the fact that you can order this thing from Germany, have it show up 40 days later on site, and you can open it up and start using it is pretty, I would say, a pretty big deal in the world of robotics. Right? It doesn't require system engineers to come on site and do this work for you. Anybody can operate this. We've had quotes from people saying, my 70-year-old grandmother and my 7-year-old daughter can operate Spot. And I think that's a fair way to look at Spot. Pretty easy to operate.
So Roger, let's put ourselves in the seat of a listener here today. If perhaps they're operating a facility and they're interested in the technology, they do a lot of inspections. What size facility do they need? Is there some scoping that you can give to a prospective customer to describe that a little bit better?
Yeah, I wish I could. I don't know of a way to do that. Well, it's a good question, Jim. I get where you're going. I can help people understand, hey, am I a good fit for Spot? And I don't have a good answer, mostly because of the industry differences. So we've deployed Spot to some small facilities where it's critical that they have eyes and ears on a small facility from a remote distance. In the manufacturing space, I can just use the word larger manufacturing sites. Basically, you have to you're making an investment in a robot, both in the cost of the robot, but also in the company culture adoption. You're changing in how you're acquiring data and where the data goes. And so you want a larger manufacturing site. But if you get out of manufacturing, get into utilities, or you get into oil and gas applications, then you start thinking about like public safety and construction projects. Everybody's industry is a little bit different in what how the value is obtained and what size site it comes to. But I think really having the listeners think about, this robot can carry sensors around my site. I can remotely view that data live, or I can have Spot collect the data and then report it to me later. I can trend on it over time. Is that valuable? How would I use that in my business? And is it valuable to me to have a robot do those things? Either, like I said, live remote operations or trending of data that I'm acquiring on my site.
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking, correct me here if this may be an incorrect assumption, but I'm looking at it as almost a algebraic function of what is the value of one particular inspection point in your facility. If it's a nuclear power plant, that's different than something else.
Right.
Then number two, how many inspection points do you have? If you have a multitude, that's an issue too. And then my third variable would be, what's the physical distance between? Because I'm guessing Spot is more maneuverable than a human, and the human may need to either walk, run, get in a golf cart, a car, or do some other things that Spot could do probably quicker. So, I think I would urge our listeners to call if they look at that, and if they have a range of high value inspection points, numerous inspection points, and if the inspection points are far apart logistically in whatever way that might be, that all of those when they interrelate are probably create a really hot spot for Spot.
Nice. No pun intended, Jim.
No pun, exactly.
That's right. Well said.
Right
That's exactly right. Yeah, perfect. But when it comes to industrial inspection, that's exactly right. Well said. I appreciate your insight there. The other applications, though, the construction progress monitoring market is a little bit different. If you're monitoring the construction of a big building and Spot's performing missions to compare the as-built, currently built, to the drawings to make sure everything's in the right place. This window is in the right place. This wall is in the right place. Mm-hmm. That's a different application. Then, of course, you get into the public safety applications, also different. So, yes, you're exactly right. Those are your listeners that are more in tune with the utilities and heavy industry side of things, we'll be looking at through the industrial inspection lens, and it is about quantity and importance of the asset inspections. So yeah.
Well, Roger, you jumped ahead to actually that was just a follow up to Gavin's points. But I'd like to know what other markets or applications has Spot been deployed in, even if they're odd, unique, or small markets. Can you enlighten us with some of those?
Yeah, and it really is all over the map. You can imagine with the operated robot like Spot, either be manually controlled or autonomous in its ability. And so everything from you go to Vegas, you might see a robot at one of the casino hotels there, right? So the entertainment side of Spot, a few of those out there that you may have seen on YouTube as well. But mining, you think about mining applications, underground mining applications, good fit for Spot, right? You got the safety aspect of that. I mentioned construction already, so this construction project monitoring has been a pretty good use of Spot. We have several partners in that space that are specific to this industry. Using a robot again to make sure the construction projects are going well. You can pay your subs faster because you've verified things are done on site. And then let's see what else would be interesting. We have a lot of innovation uses of robots. So we haven't talked too much today, but Spot does have a manipulation arm on it. And so there are certainly folks looking at what can I do with an autonomous robot with a manipulation arm. Are there tasks in manufacturing and facilities where I can perform inspections or can actually move parts in a certain way? So there's a lot of innovative uses of Spot with that. And then insurance as well. So mentioning kind of the fire department having to go into an area if you have an insurance claim. Maybe insurance can go into an area that may be not safe for humans after disaster events. Another application that robots being used by insurance companies. What else is interesting for you there? I think academic, of course. So we've got several robots in academia where they perform research for what may be future applications, for robots, or working with their local industrial partners to develop a new application there. So really, there's a lot of industries using these robots in various ways.
And do you think, as we close out this conversation, what does the future of Boston Dynamics look like? Just spreading out to more industries and increasing the uses and.
Yes, I guess I would say, Evan. I mean, in general, I think broadly, as a company, we have this vision for robots that fit seamlessly into our lives and expand the human potential. And to do that, as a broad sense, robots need to kind of be able to go anywhere, able to start manipulating anything and really understanding more about what they're doing. And so we look at like Atlas, one day that something like that will be for sale. It's a humanoid robot. It's an amazing machine, but it doesn't know things. And so I think the biggest challenge as robotics companies in the future, so as example, I've used this before, as a human, we might have a coffee cup in our hand and we need to hurry because someone's holding the door for us or holding the elevator. And we know how to hurry holding a cup of coffee in our hand much differently if we're holding a book in our hand, right? We can swing a book and get there quickly. Coffee, we're going to be real delicate. It's because we know something about the object that we're holding. We know there's risks. We understand what could happen if scenarios. And that's really the next big frontier, I think, for robots is understand their surroundings better, making decisions. Should I drop this thing I'm holding, or should I fall in such a way that protects this thing that I'm holding? Things that we make very quickly and we understand, but that's going to really put robots into this environment where they're adopted. They're, like we talked about before, they're not something you take selfies with. They're just things that are doing jobs around us. They're dishwashers, right? They're just present doing something. Right. And so I think that's where we want to go as a company. What exactly those functions, applications, details are is TBD, but it is certainly something as a company we're focused on.
That's amazing. How can listeners contact you, get connected with you, or get connected with Boston Dynamics?
Yeah, I would say probably not YouTube, but the best place would be our website. There's a contact sales form there, and by filling that form out, you can specify the application that you're thinking about robots for, and that'll help us determine who's the right team to get back with you. So what I haven't done is maybe explain, as a company, we have the Stretch team for Stretch robot used in warehouses and logistics. We have the industrial inspection team, which I'm a part of with Spot. And also on Spot, we have a government team. So again, public safety, government applications, keeping people safe. Then we have a team focused on innovation and academia with Spot. So that's kind of how we're divided. And based on filling that form out, we'll get the right person to give you a call and follow up. So we'd certainly love to talk to anybody about their application and see if we can get some robots to work on your sites.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roger, for joining us. This was a great conversation. Jim, any final words?
Yeah, I mean, Roger, again, thank you. Again, our guest today was Roger Hebert, Industrial Inspection Sales Manager for Boston Dynamics. Roger, thank you for really a very insightful discussion today. And we look forward to talking to you in the future about further developments with Boston Dynamics as your effort evolves. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Look forward to hopefully connecting with you in the future. It's been fun. Appreciate the time today.
All right, we'll see you again next time.
Great.